everybody, and head back to the top of our agenda with our agenda item number 1, adoption of gambling venue policy. And I would invite Rachel Horton up to speak to the paper, please.
Good morning, Council.
Morena.
Hard act to follow. So, as you know, on the 23rd of March, Council met and heard from the public and submissions around the gambling venues policy. And after considering all of the information in front of you and the information that you heard, you resolved to amend the policy to incorporate a sinking lid approach rather than a reduced cap, which was what was proposed during public consultation. You also resolved to prohibit the ability for incorporated clubs when amalgamating to merge their gaming machines, and under certain circumstances permit relocations of gaming machines to upgraded venues that are approved by the Council. So the decision to allow for gaming machines to be relocated into an upgraded venue was included to reflect the submissions that Council received from operators who wanted the ability to relocate venues from to more attractive or appropriate premises without losing the benefit of their licence. And it was asked of me to come back to you as to how we might, in effect, how the policy would achieve a relocation to an upgraded venue under the new policy. So I looked into that and took some advice, and what I'm recommending to you is that we include into the policy a clause that says the relocation of the venue is not inconsistent with the purposes of this policy. And my view is that incorporating this additional criterion, the Council then retains its broad discretion to assess the appropriateness of any relocated venue against the purposes of the policy. And that includes, of course, addressing the cumulative effects that additional opportunities for gambling present, as well as curbing gambling growth, minimising harm to the community, and controlling the location of Class 4 venues, which is the purposes of the policy. And you also asked me to consider how that decision might be made in a practical effect, and I believe that, like many of our policies which set the direction for council officers, that the delegation of that power to decide relocation can rest with the Chief Executive, and that provides the Council with the broad discretion to delegate its responsibilities under the Local Government Act, as we do with most of our policies. We're not proposing to delegate it any further than that, and that decision around upgraded venues remains with the Chief Executive. So the meeting of the 23rd of March resolved the criteria that sits within the policy, but because the policy that was consulted on was different in proposal, we are now here today looking for you to adopt the policy in its full form.
Thank you, Rachel. Are there any questions? I'll ask for a mover. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Brosnan, seconded by Councillor Brown. Did you wish to speak to the motion?
Yeah, just to give my thanks to, I think, some really well-reasoned recommendations you've come back to us on after those hearings and deliberations, Rachel. I concur with the positions you've come to in terms of where those delegations sit. I think that's appropriate for a policy of council to have that delegation sit with the Chief Executive for something like that, and I think the purposes that we've set out in the bylaw give the Chief Executive some really good guidance on what we consider an upgraded venue or not in particular to that. So yeah, thank you for the paper, and I support all of the decisions that we came to as part of the hearing deliberations. Kia ora.
Councillor Brown.
Just to say, apologies for not being able to be at the hearings, but I'm really comfortable with where the rest of you landed at the the gambling venues policy and fully support the recommendations.
Any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor McGrath.
My mind hasn't been changed. I still don't support what and where we were at. We're not going to go on too much about that, but what I would be saying now is next time this comes around, hopefully we'll be able to get a little bit more accurate information, because some of the information presented to us in the hearing was different from what we'd tracked down. It was different from what was presented to Hastings, and it'd be good if we could get some credible, reliable, accurate information. And now we've been doing it for a while, we should be able to get some accurate trends, both locally, regionally and nationally. And yeah, so I'm just going to leave it at that on this one, because I could go on forever.
Thank you, Councillor McGrath. Councillor Tapani.
Thank you. I'm speaking in support of the paper, and with a proviso and a reminder to our community, actually. The decision of this council to start retrenching or withdrawing the number of gaming machines in our community will have financial impacts, as we've discussed in the hearings, on our community groups. And so as our long-term plan is circulating around our community, I would ask our community to take a look at the Community Services Division of our LTP, compare that to the changes that this policy will provide as an impact in our communities, and if they feel there's a need to submit on that, I would encourage them to do so. Kia ora.
We've had 3 speak in support of the motion. Is there anyone that wishes to speak against? No, I will therefore put that. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against?
Against.
Councillor McGrath and Councillor Mawson and Councillor Simpson. Carried. Moving on to agenda item number 2, the Hawke's Bay Airport Limited Draft Statement of Intent 2021-22, and invite Caroline up to talk to the paper.
Thank you. Through the Mayor. The purpose of this report is to present the Hawke's Bay Airport's revised draft statement of intent for the 21-22 year, and to receive any feedback from Council to take back to the Hawke's Bay Airport prior to final adoption of the statement of intent. You will recall a few weeks ago that the airport came in and presented their 6-monthly financial report, and as part of that presentation they also covered off their statement of intent. So I'll take the report as written, as read, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Open up for all questions from councillors. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Taylor, seconded by Councillor Crown. Did you wish to speak to that, Councillor Taylor?
As Caroline has said, we've had a couple of presentations from the airport, and obviously things are tracking a little bit greater than they had anticipated. They are also showing, I think, a willingness to diversify their business, and so I'm fully supportive. I believe that at the moment, well, the airport has and is still being well managed, well governed, and is a, their statement of intent is a great reflection of where they're heading.
Councillor Crown.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Only other thing to add, looking forward to the completion of the terminal upgrade scheduled for the end of May 2021. I think that's really exciting for us as a city and as a region.
Open up for any other councillors that may like to speak to the motion. No, I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. And we have Caroline with us again for the Hawke's Bay Museums Trust Draft Statement of Intent and Financial Reporting.
So this report includes the Museums Trust financial report for the 6 months ended 31st of December, and also their draft statement of intent. And this, much the same as the previous paper, the purpose of this report is to receive any comments or feedback from Council to pass back to the Hawke's Bay Museums Trust prior to final adoption of their statement of intent.
Are there any questions? Councillor Brown.
I have one. Just wondering if you could jog my memory. On page 56, it says under capital expenditure that there's no planned expenditure on buildings. Where does the storage facility fit? I thought it was going to fit under this, but does it just sit within the councils, or how does that work?
So with the storage facility, the new one that's been purchased in Hastings, there was a contribution from both councils. So our contribution actually came from each city council's financial statements.
Okay, and so we're going to jointly own and manage and renovate that together, not through this.
That's the plan, but there's a Hawke's Bay Museums Trust joint working group that are working through all of those things at the moment, so it's still underway.
Brilliant, thank you.
There's no further questions. I'll ask for someone to move, please. Thank you, Councillor Wright, seconded by Councillor Crystal. Would you like to speak to this, Councillor Wright?
Yes, just to answer maybe what Councillor Brown was saying, the Museums Trust's main focus is the collection, the storage and maintenance and preservation of the collection, and the buildings are currently an asset on the council's books. We own the asset. It's really just a business as usual paper while we make the future decisions around the governance structure for the museum. And I'm pleased to report, being on that committee, that work has been progressing really well and at a really good pace. And yeah, there's with the purchase of the storage facility, there's some exciting things going to be happening in that space. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Crystal? No one else would like to speak to the motion, then I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. And our final new agenda item is actions arising from the 2020 annual plan hearings, a report back. And I'll invite Adele to come up and speak to that and answer any questions.
And through the Mayor, we've brought back some of the actions that weren't sort of identified as resolutions with Council, and so this report identifies some of the questions that were raised by Council and some of the responses by staff officers. So the first, if you'd like, would you like me to run through them one by one? Otherwise I can have it as read and answer any questions.
We'll take it as read, and if there's any specific questions from councillors, they can ask those. Councillor McGrath.
You're just through the chair. Let's start off at number 1 here. I'm not a fan of the living wage and the way it's worded and how it's worked out. But I do know that we've got a lot of council staff who work really hard in adverse conditions, 24/7, some of them, and I'd like to think that we could bring them up to a realistic wage for the work they're doing.
A living wage.
I think I said realistic.
Thank you, Councillor McGrath. Councillor Bogue.
Yes, I have a question along the same lines about recommendation 1. The action was to investigate the living wage, basically, but the update is to employ or engage somebody to undertake a review of minimum wage, which is different from the living wage. I just was wondering how that fits together.
Through the Mayor, it will include the living wage.
Thank you. Perhaps that could be, anyway, that's all right. Just one other comment, if you don't mind, Madam Mayor, through you. Thank you very much for doing this. This is really constructive and helpful, and it's obvious that this is a plan, a map, an update on how we're following through with the hearing and the recommendations made. So thank you for that, Ms Henderson.
Councillor Brown.
I'm just interested in number 14, the women's rest building. I know that's really dear to a lot of members of our community's hearts, and I understand all the compromises we've had to make in terms of the long-term plan, but I just don't know if pushing it out a full 10 years is going to be acceptable to a significant portion of our population. So I was just wondering, can we look at, is there any sort of compromise here? Can we look at some external funding or maybe look at fundraising somehow to try and get something moving in this space?
We could look at something like that, absolutely. There's also an opportunity for community members who are interested in this to submit to our long-term plan and share their views. My understanding of external funding and grants and things like that is typically it won't fund the whole of a project. So there would need to be some sort of budget within council as well, but certainly would look forward to receiving submissions as part of our long-term plan. Councillor Crown.
Through the Mayor, a couple of questions and comments. The first, I was just hoping that we could get some explanation. There are a number of references to service level agreements or renewal agreements in the table, and just for the sake of our public to get a sense of understanding of what that is and how it works.
So your first question was service level agreements. If we're thinking about the example, if there's a service level agreement, we've got an undertaking with a community group, for example, about what we're expecting in return for a grant in some cases. So that's the undertaking, and we know exactly what we're going to get back in return for the agreement.
So it's attached to a grant?
It can be, yes, that's right.
Okay. And the renewal agreements, I think it was to do with sport, Hawks. Oh, sorry, I've made notes and not...
That's right, sorry.
7 was the Sport Hawke's Bay.
Sport Hawke's Bay service level agreement.
Oh, sorry, this will be part of the process for renewal agreements. Is that just a word's missing?
Yes.
Okay, cool, thank you.
Apologies.
And just my other comment, I saw that there, in the comment box there, and to do with the update on the Three Waters reform, that the officer didn't know about the Marae fund that Marae were able to access. That's a $30 million fund, and I guess just looking for some reassurance that things like that we are keeping on top of what is available to our community in that space.
Noted, thank you.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Brosnan.
Just a quick question on number 20. We had a lot of submissions, I remember, in this annual plan from people wanting new bins, our youth council wanting, I think it was potentially less bins and recycling receptacles, etc. And we decided as a council to prepare a policy on that to give some guidance to staff. I'm just a little concerned with the last sentence, I suppose, of the answer, which is if and when a policy is developed, when council's asked for a policy.
Through the Mayor, I believe that might have been timing when some of this information was being prepared in subsequent council meetings.
Thank you.
If there's no further questions, can I ask for a mover, please?
Happy to move.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Brosnan, seconded by Councillor Brown. Did you wish to speak to this, Deputy Mayor Brosnan?
No, just tautoko. It's a good report. Thank you.
Councillor Brown?
Yes, Sam. Thank you.
Open up for any other comments from councillors? No? I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. So we now move into the double debate of our reports and recommendations from the standing committees. I will move through these to be moved in bulk, but if there is any particular papers that you would like to ask questions on or vote on independently, just let me know as we move through them. So first up, we have the reports from our Napier People and Places Committee held on the 18th of March, and one agenda item being amendments to the 2021 Council Committee meeting schedule, moved by Council.
Decision of council.
Was it a decision of
Yeah.
council? It's not showing that on my, okay.
Right down the bottom.
Okay, so we don't need to worry about that one. Thank you, Councillor Boat. Reports from Prosperous Napier Committee held on the 18th of March, being a quarterly report for the 6 months ended 31 December. Moved by Councillor Mawson, seconded by Councillor Taylor. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Reports from Sustainable Napier Committee held on the 25th of March.
Can I ask questions on the chlorine one?
We will consider the chlorine one separately. So first up we have Lease of Reserve, Halega o Matua Whānau Charitable Trust. Number 2 we'll keep separate. 3, projects update, and 4, project update on Pandora Industrial Waterways. 6, curbside refuge wheelie bin replacement. That's
Yeah, that one was on the
laid on the table.
Laid on the table.
6, stormwater compliance monitoring reports, and 7, update on Three Waters reform program. So thank you, Councillor Price, for moving those, seconded by Councillor Mawson. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. And we will now do the chlorine-free review. Deputy Mayor Brosnan.
Thank you. I suppose I just had a question following the debate we had on the 25th of March. We were to be sent the final peer review document. That peer review document came through and that was dated the 18th of March. So I'm just looking for confirmation from staff that A, we've been sent the right report, and if we have, why that wasn't available at the 25th.
Morning everyone, through the Mayor. Thank you for the question. I actually can't recall the exact date, but I'll accept that is the 18th. There was a period where I hadn't even reviewed that report, and then it needed to go to my director for review, and there was a week delay there, so that's why there have been delays.
Okay, so sorry, just a follow-on question. Is it fair to say that there were no substantive changes then under yours or your director's review of that peer review?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. That answers my question. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So can I have a mover for the report, please? Councillor Price, thank you. Seconded by Deputy Mayor Brosnan. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Moving on to our Future Napier Committee held on the 25th of March, and we have the 4 agenda items: policy on dangerous, effective and insanitary buildings, liability management policy review, resource consent activity update, and we do have an amendment for number 4, the P120 parking review, and I'll just ask her.
Just noting if I can keep my conflict on that one. Thank you.
Thank you. So the P120 parking review paper, the purpose of it was to provide better all-day parking options for commuters, but also to visitors who are wanting longer stays than 2 hours, and providing closer commuting spaces, and to free up those sort of high-value parks, short-term car parks that are right in the heart of our CBD. Following the Future Napier Committee, Councillor McGrath raised a concern around, the Clive Square, the proposal of 3.1A2, which is Clive Square West between Tennyson Street and Dickens Street. Particularly that group of shops that sits there where the Pilates studio is and the hair studio and things like that. And we took that away, and we did some occupancy surveying, and we had a good look at the area, and we believe that now that should remain as P120s and not be included into the all-day parking. The occupancy for that area is quite high, and it's been well utilised, probably by people visiting those shops. And so we'd propose to just amend that, if you were interested, to go from Clive Square West between Emerson and Dickens rather than Tennyson and Dickens, and it would just take that little bit out. And that's what I'm proposing.
I'll just open up for any questions from councillors on that proposed amendment. Councillor Crown.
Thank you through the Mayor. So just to clarify, how many car spaces or parks does that apply to?
I think there's 30 no, sorry, there's 10 space here.
Thank you.
So we'd then be looking at a total of 116 spaces that would be converting from P120 to Audit.
Thank you.
Councillor McGrath.
It's through the chair. What sort of flexibility do we have if retailers or businesses come back to us once we make this change? What sort of flexibility do we have?
Flexibility for?
Or perhaps to change things back, or for example, I notice in the Onikawa industrial area, outside the coffee shops there, we've got P10 minutes parking outside. So we recognise that outside coffee places, there's a need for very short-term parking of 10 minutes. Are we able to, if some of our cafes come back to us, make these alterations without it coming back through council?
I believe that the infrastructure team can make some changes through their provisions that they have through NZTA. I'll have to confirm that, but usually any other changes, particularly anything made to paid parking, would have to come back through council. But that's not to say that we can't keep tweaking this and making sure that we're getting it right. The parking offerings and the way our city is operating is regularly changing, and you know, we're really committed to trying to keep tweaking to get it right, not making massive wholesale changes, but smaller incremental changes that can respond to the changing needs of parkers in the city.
A question through you, Your Worship. Could you explain a little bit more about the assessment you used during this period? The term you used was?
Was it parking survey? Occupancy survey?
Yes,
Yeah.
occupancy survey. So what is that?
Well, it's a manual system right now where we ask staff to go out at points throughout the day, and in this case we went out I think 6 times in the day to basically manually note how many cars are in each car park, and we did that for 3 weeks, and that sort of gives us a reasonable idea of the occupancy. We also run every year we do a full occupancy survey of the whole CBD, and we do that in December. It is, you know, a really busy time for the CBD, so those occupancy rates are probably a little inflated, but it's a good time for us to get a good feel of how occupancy's going. Yeah.
And so, by extension, was there any noticeable difference? Because I remember when the paper first came to council, we talked about there are a range of tools that we as staff use to assess demand on our parking and where we might need to make flexible changes. So, as a result of the occupancy survey, were there any noticeable differences between our visual assessments on the ground with our team and the occupancy survey? And as a result of that, did those differentiations result in any recommendations for change going forward?
So I haven't compared the 3 weeks that we did for these P120 car park changes to our December full occupancy survey. But the December occupancy survey is, like I say, it's at Christmas time. It's a very different time of year to now. And it's a snapshot in time. It's not ideal. You know, we do have some ideas around technology that can help us with more real-time data around occupancy, and I'll be bringing that to you. In fact, we've got a workshop on that very soon, and you'll see sort of how technology can do this better.
And so, essentially, sorry, just to finish for my last question, through you, Your Worship. So, based on that, you still have full confidence in the practices that we use at the moment to assess the parking needs?
Yeah, it's not just the occupancy survey. Our staff are out every day, and it's their, most of this paper, you know, the places that we identified came from their observations, and they're a wealth of knowledge, really, of who's parking where, what the usage looks like, you know, what are the hot spots, what are the areas that are impacting the city, and we really listen to them when we bring these things. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Councillor McGrath, then Councillor Bug.
With these long-term car parks, I'll call them long-term car parks, or ability to park for 8 hours, what will that cost for an 8-hour stay?
It's $8.
$1 an hour?
Yeah.
Cheap. Just through you, Madam Mayor. Thank you for taking our concerns into consideration and making that change. I'm just curious, are there any other instances already existing where there is street parking that is all day? I know there are, big car parks that we ask for, all day parking or lease parking. Are there any other examples other than these ones that were already existing whereby people can lease them for all day? On the street?
So we have on the street. We do have some on street all day parking, sort of further out, and I guess the purpose of this paper is hoping that where we have, underutilisation in the P120s, that those people who don't choose to park all the way out and would prefer to park all day closer in won't then come right in and clog up those high value parks. So yes, there is all day parking on street further out, yeah, free and paid.
So just to clarify, the amendment essentially that is before us is the removal of point 2, being Clive Square West between Tennyson Street and Dickens Street. 33 car spaces will be retained at the P120 hours?
No, that the amendment is for it to read now to say Clive Square West between Emerson Street and Dickens Street. Yep.
Will stay in?
Will stay and be converted to all-day parking, and that will leave that small shopping area of those parking spaces there to be all P120s.
So in terms of the number of car spaces that means we're leaving in? To include in the resolution, because we have the number.
Right, so it's 116 in total now?
No, okay, so
sorry.
we'll calculate out.
Yeah.
So through the Mayor, is it 10 spaces? So in the paper it's broken out. We currently have 33 car spaces.
Sorry? 16 spaces.
16, thank you.
Retained. Thank you. We will move this separately as there's been some changes made. So do I have a mover and seconder?
I'll move it.
Thank you, Councillor McGrath and Councillor Crown. Would you like to speak to this, Councillor McGrath?
I have to speak for it because apparently I can't against it now. Look, yeah, I'd just like to recognise that the team's got a tough job. It's always moving, businesses are moving, things are changing, and we do respond and react accordingly, give or take. And it's good that we've been able to come to this slight change today, and I do hope that we continue to have a little bit of flexibility into the future as the shopping precinct changes or retail changes. And yeah, so I'll support the amendment and the motion today.
Thank you. Councillor Crown. Anyone else wish to speak to it? I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Item 1 and 2 were decisions of council, so that just leaves number 3 being the resource consent activity update, of which Deputy Mayor Brosnan has declared a conflict. Do I have a mover and seconder, please? Councillor Mawson, thank you. Councillor Crystal, thank you. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. On to the reports from the Audit and Risk Committee held on the 26th of March. And reading through, we have the Risk Management Report for March 2021.
Your Worship, I've got a couple of questions on that one.
On that one?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We'll have those questions now. And yep.
Oh, okay. I'm just interested to get a little bit more information around what was discussed, and I suppose the in this paper, which I don't believe, or I'm looking in the wrong spots, actually gets elevated to us. They talk about the strategic risks and the operational risks for council, and I just wondered if that would be something that could be elevated to the full council, or is that something that there's a good reason why that stays at the Audit and Risk Committee level?
I might actually hand over to Adele, sorry, because I am not 100% sure of the answer myself. Thank you, Adele. Through the Mayor.
And through the Mayor, and thank you, Steph. So yes, traditionally the Audit and Risk Committee has a focus around, working through and identifying and looking at our risk register. So they often review the whole register, but on a quarterly basis, we certainly identify the extreme and significant risks of council. But if the council are supportive, then further reports can be presented rather than just going direct to the Audit and Risk Committee for their consideration. We've got 3 members and 2 independents on the Audit and Risk Committee. So we've got Councillor Taylor, Councillor Simpson and the Mayor on the committee. So they might also like to talk to whether or not they feel supportive of bringing it through to full council.
I certainly would be supportive of that report being shared with all of council if there is a desire for that to come through.
I would only make the comment that all elected members can go to that meeting. They won't have voting rights necessarily, but they are welcome to attend, and that report is available.
So currently that would be available on the hub under Audit and Risk. Do all councillors have access to the Audit and Risk folder on the hub?
And through the Mayor, it is a public meeting.
Oh, and it's, that's right, so it's actually on the website as well. Yeah. Councillor Crown.
Through the Mayor, just a quick comment. I actually feel quite confident in the way that the system is now. I would hope that if there was any concern, that the elected members that sit on the Audit and Risk Committee would bring those concerns to us for our consideration. So, given the fact that we can access those reports anyway, I'm quite comfortable with the setup now.
Councillor Mawson.
Through the Mayor, just to agree with Councillor Crown, I have full, I believe in the Audit and Risk Committee. I believe the committee are making good judgment.
Sorry, I absolutely, as it is a publicly available document and you can access that, then I think I agree the current system is working.
Yeah, I might just get some help to try and find it.
Did you have any further questions, Councillor Brown?
I was just after a little bit. So it's essentially the paper that we're going through a process of increasing our maturity in risk management, and we're changing the way we do it. Is that essentially?
Through the Mayor, rather than changing, it's really appreciating and understanding risk better as an organisation. We've got a full-time resource on board now, looking at what we're doing across council, from our reporting to acknowledging risks, to preparing material for the Audit and Risk Committee as well. So we have a mapped out journey about what we're looking to do and our improvements in the area.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Right, if there's no further questions on that, I'll continue through the rest of the agenda items. Number 2 being sensitive expenditure, Mayor and Chief Executive. 3, external accountability, investment and debt report. 4, wastewater treatment plant outfall pipe repair summary. And 5, health and safety report. Do I have a mover and seconder? Thank you, Councillor Taylor and Councillor Brown. Did the members of the Audit and Risk Committee wish to comment on any of those papers before we move it? No, I'll move the motion then. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. And now we're on to the reports from the Maori Committee, of which we have already discussed and debated item 2. So that leaves number 1, the draft memorandum of understanding with Māti Kawata. Do I have...
Sorry, could I just ask a question about number 1, which we haven't discussed? The action, one of the actions from this meeting was that the team leader governance would notify the committee about how many people in Ahurea are on the Maori electoral roll. Is this just going to be made available at the next Maori Committee meeting, or would it be possible for those figures to be made available publicly before then?
That's with regards to item 2, so that's
Sorry, yeah,
fine, but we can certainly make...
The committee have already received through the chair, I've already received the figures, so we can distribute them to the council as a period.
I already have shared
They
them
have
with the
been,
council.
but could they be put on the minutes of this meeting? Would that be possible?
Not if they weren't actually discussed at the meeting.
So is that information confidential then?
No, not at all.
No. Okay, thank you.
Would you like that to be distributed more widely somehow?
I thought it
with
was
our
really interesting
community?
information that I think the general public may be interested in it also.
Oh, if we could just make an action that we will look to share that information with the community and how that's best done.
Sure, thank you. Sorry about that.
That's fine. Do I have a mover, please, for the item 1? Thank you, Deputy Mayor Brosnan. Seconded by Councillor Tapani. Thank you. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. And on to our reports. We didn't have any minor matters, but I didn't actually ask for any.
Start again.
I was a little occupied with other things at the time. I will give a quick opportunity in case anyone did have any minor matters. Councillor Taylor.
I just would like to raise that there is a move to develop a strategic development plan for the regional sports park, and we have had input into the terms of reference, and the group are looking for Napier City Council to be part of that process and to pick up a very small portion of the cost. And so I'm quite happy to answer any questions in relation to that, but there is an opportunity for us to discuss that and the contribution that we could make to that.
So if there's any questions in terms of any decision making around this, obviously that can't be undertaken in this forum, so we will follow through with that separately. But if anyone has any questions at this stage of Councillor Taylor? Okay. Thank you for the heads up, Councillor Taylor, much appreciated. And now reports under delegated or... Oh, sorry.
Oh, was that for me? Actually, seeing as it's minor matters, I just wanted to follow on from Councillor Crown's acknowledgement of Matua Daniel. As we discussed earlier today, while he's not a resident of Napier, he'll have impacts and networks here, and that was the passing of Richard Puanaki, composer, a teacher, and a lobbyist for a number of Māori issues. So, ngā mihi.
And former Ardmore colleague.
Got around.
Councillor Bogue.
Yes, I just wanted to raise a minor matter concerning housing. I do have a housing portfolio. We don't have a housing committee, so I wasn't quite sure if this is the way to raise it. But there is a strategic review of housing, our own housing being done this year. And I wanted to make the suggestion that we, those of us who wish to, and perhaps with some councillors from Hastings District Council, go down to Palmerston North just for the day and have a look at their new pensioner housing that they have built there, as it would be a relevant piece of information and perhaps a model for what could be done here. So I'm not quite sure whether it's a minor matter or how else to raise it, but I wasn't quite sure whether there are other ways of raising this as a suggestion.
Thank you, Councillor Bogue. And again, we'll note that as an action to look into a potential trip down to Palmerston North to look at their new housing stock. I understand it's pretty fantastic. Yeah. Okay, no one else? So reports under delegated authority, there are no tenders let, so we'll move these together. And the second agenda item is documents executed under seal. Don't know if there's any questions of council officers on any of this. Right, so I'll ask for a mover, please. Thank you, Councillor Wright, and seconded by Deputy Mayor Brosnan. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. And could I have a mover and seconder to go into public excluded, please? Thank you, Councillor Mawson and Councillor Crystal. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried.